This is David Allen. Most of you know who I am. I'm in conversation with uh, Russell. I counted it up on my fingers. 44 years ago, we met when Russell was leading an insight seminar, a personal growth training that was so inspirational to me. I said, that's the work I want to do, and I want to work with him. And a few years later, we did that. So anyway, we've got a long history. And those of you who were at the GTD Summit in 2019, you saw Russell on stage with me. We talked about, a lot about our history together. But enough of that. Russell, what would you like people to know about Russell Bishop?
Oh, goodness. There's the David Allen question, that's for sure. That's I think the most interesting thing about that question is that I've always been in sort of a not obvious shyness about that. Who I naturally am is pretty go to the party and see if I can match any of the wallpaper. Although if you see me on stage, it looks like I'm an extrovert, but I'm really more of an introvert. But I think the real thing behind all that is that since I can remember, I just always had this deep compassion and caring about what happens to, for, and with people, and how do we make life better. And of course, when I met our shared spiritual teacher, John Rogers, when I learned it was more about the answer to that question is about how do we produce more loving in what we do. And I think that's probably the main thing. How do we bring more loving into life?
Yeah, and so give people at least a short version. I know it's a long version. It could be quite extensive, but sort of how'd you get from born to here? What were some of the milestones along the way? That and by the way, folks, one of the reasons I'm doing this conversation with Russell is he has a new book out, From Self Talk to Soul Talk, which is actually fabulous. And we can talk about that more specifically too, Russell. But a little backdrop, in terms of, how you got here and some of the things, the highlights of your game.
Grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and our family were Presbyterian, and we had several Presbyterian ministers in the family. And I always hated loving church or loved hating church. It was always a sort of a strange dilemma there. What I didn't like were just all the sermony stuff. But what I really loved was the music. And so much so that I was in choir and I did all that sort of things. And I later discovered that the music was important to me because there was a transcendent quality to it. Whatever people was saying was fairly empty, but whatever happened in the music was uplifting. And it was many years later that I learned that's because that's an element of one of the primary connections back into spirit, which is sound. I advance a few years and I wind up at UC Berkeley on a strike line. I get hit by a tear gas canister, pick it up to throw it back. Nobody says that's going to be really hot. And all of a sudden I'm ripped out of my body. And if you can imagine being sort of 25 feet up in the air, diagonally looking back, I could see myself as clearly as I can see you on this screen. And I heard myself screaming, and I'll clean it up a little bit, "Why don't you idiots love us?" And all of a sudden, bam, I was jarred back into my body with this huge awareness coming over me that the message was about loving and peace, and the strategy was yell, scream, and throw things. So dropped that, left the campus, left the strike line, went over to a friend's house on Shattuck Avenue and stood in the mirror for about an hour or so crying. I cut my hair off and shaved my beard and just kept saying, "Who are you?" And that was really sort of the moment of awakening that what my life really wanted me to be about. And then from there, things just progressed. I wound up shifting where I was going to focus. Uh, got a degree that would help me work with people in awakening, and eventually wound up in the whole personal transformation movement, sort of an early pioneer in large group stuff. And that led to working with my spiritual teacher to create Insight Seminars, which was supposed to be a once in a while spare bedroom thing, and wound up in 43 countries around the world. So that's kind of like the abbreviated cliff notes of that story.
Yeah, and that, but you also have then that morphed, or I don't know if it's a sidebar, but you certainly morphed into the corporate consulting world. I mean, aside, um, sometimes when I describe Russell Bishop, I say he's probably the most incisive guy I've ever met. So I haven't looked up the definition of incisive, but I think it's absolutely absolutely the right word. You can walk into a room and split truth from reality, and faster than anybody I've ever met in that regard. And it was so quite valuable, obviously, in terms of your professional career, in the corporate training consulting world. So speak a little bit about that. I'm curious how you'd frame it now.
Sure. Well, the Insight was, maybe a year or so old, and we had done one or two seminars on the East Coast when someone from then Scott Paper Company came through and said, an executive, and said, "Hey, can you do something for my team like what you did for us personally here?" And I said, "I don't know. We could find out." And so we ran our first program for a corporate entity of that size and scope. We'd done a few small businesses in LA, but this was the first time with a Fortune 500 company. Um, and that turned out to be pretty well received. And then that opened up us doing a whole bunch of seminars inside of Scott Paper Company. We got some Wall Street Journal coverage, and then that really took off in terms of opening the world to this kind of work. Uh, and of course, you came in right around that time and really took this to another level as well. But there's this. It's a gift that sometimes shows up like a curse inside of me, in that, as you said, I can walk into something, and if there's a thing that's important that's out of place, somehow I just go, "Oh, that," and I don't know why I go, "Oh, that," but it just shows up inside of me, and then one or two questions show up, throw the questions out, and we could go, "Well, why this but not that?" And that then raises awareness of the people we're working with to go, "Whoa, that's a good question. Why this, not that?" And that whole process, the more someone steps into that level of inquiry, the more it's like information is just downloaded into me or inside of me, and it opens up the next level of vision and question. Um, I'd say really it's just a deep sensitivity to when this will sound woo woo for some people, but when energies align and when they don't align. And I think the simplest metaphor would be in the old days of radio sets where you had to tune the radio. If you're on the signal but not quite, you hear the content but with a lot of static. And that's another thing that for me, I can hear the static. Or if the lens is out of focus, I see the blur, even if others don't. And again, that can be a real blessing, but it also can be not everybody wants to know about the static or the blur.
Well, your new book, and so let's fast forward to that simply so that anybody who's not aware of that, you can tell them, because it's a certainly new agey sounding thing, self talk, soul talk, and so I know you, and you and I share the sacred irreverence, as a basic style. Don't take anything too seriously, right? And because nothing's happening. But you know, so but there's a very real sense, and what you just described about yourself, I think in the book, you've done a very good job of doing that with yourself. So being quite incisive with, you know, how you got to where you are, what was off, what was not off, or what was on, etc. So maybe speak. You know, this is kind of the book promo. You know, paid political announcement here. So that why should somebody read the book?
Well, it's you know, there's a lot of books out there that are all full of advice, and the publisher said this book belongs in the self-help category, so it's in there. But lots of those kinds of books are full of prescriptive, you should this and you shouldn't that kind of thing. And this book is full of questions. Well, why this and not that kind of thing? And I think what really sits behind it, from self-talk to soul talk, I think the simplest explanation would be we've all had the experience of going, oh no, when something blows up. And the oh no is, I knew it. I just knew it. And I blew it anyway. But we've all had the other side of that where we go, yes, yes, it worked. I knew it would work. And so I asked people, whether individually in mentoring sessions or with whole groups, that anybody ever had that experience? And just about everybody has. So what's the difference between, oh God, I blew it, and oh yes, I knew it? And most people are stumped. But the answer is in the question. What's the difference? I just paid attention one time and not the other. And self-talk and soul talk can be sort of reduced in an expansive way, if I mixed all those languages together, to awareness. And what am I paying attention to? Am I paying attention to the louder voice inside of me, the one that's been programmed with criticism and negativity and, oh my God, and we can't do that and all that kind of stuff? Or am I learning to attune to the quieter voice that says, careful, careful, watch this? That voice everyone has, but we're not really taught to pay much attention to it. And so the book really is about, so what are the two conversations you're having inside, or the two arguments you're having inside, or what's one part of you driving toward and the other part saying, yeah, but it might be better over here. And it's really learning how to pay attention to that inner guidance, not about an outer, it's about an inner. And everyone has access to that inner. We just don't really get much training anywhere along the line about even noticing, much less paying attention.
You know, it's interesting, Russell, you say that, because I'm often asked these days, and people interviewing me, they said, you know, what would David say to the David at 24 years old? You know, and the one thing that shows up is that I have an intuition. You know, I was not aware of that. You know, much like you just said, I who knew that there was a still small voice that was a lot sharper than I was going to be, you know, for a long time, and to pay attention to that. And you know, again, until you know we met our, you know, spiritual coach, that was not a very conscious event for me. So yeah, to your point, when people say ultimately, you know, Russell, the kind of work I'm doing with GTD and all this stuff, people, how do I set priorities? How do I set priorities? And there's, you know, if there was an easy answer to that, I'd make more money than I'm making now, you know, or if there was a magic pill that people could take, they go, oh, I know my priorities now. I know exactly what I need to do. Right? There isn't one other than trust your intuition, or your liver, or your gut, or your seat of your pants, or whatever the hell you want to call that thing. You know, but it is there for sure. Yeah. Well, good that
intuition.
You wrote a book about that.
Yeah, and see, intuition is, Einstein said intuition is the sacred gift and the rational mind is the servant. But we live in a world that's inverted that and made the rational mind the almighty, and the intuition is just pushed off to the side. And Einstein said that 100 and some years ago. Uh, so when I was working on the book, part of what I was looking at was intuition, uh, insight, uh, different kinds of awareness and awakening. And intuition, as I learned in a little research, uh, comes from a Latin word, intuere, which literally means to look at. And intuition simply means look. And why did they come up with that word? Because it's already being revealed, but in various sacred scriptures it says, hey, if you have eyes, see. But then the question is which eyes? And the
Yeah.
world is designed so we get distracted by what we see physically, but it's what do we see inwardly where the real gold and the real juice is.
Well, it was fascinating to me as I was uh, discovering all the theosophists and all the sort of spiritual masters and all that stuff back in the 70s, even before I met JR. That a whole lot of the spiritual training for Gurdjieff and Spinsky and all that was observation. It was just observation. Yeah. Just look. So to your point, it was like, just look and just be quiet and see. Interestingly, I took a drawing class from the son of the woman who wrote Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, and that was fascinating because, if I was going to draw you right now, before I took that class, I would try to draw your nose like I think a nose should look, right? As opposed to what is the nose really looking like right now? And in a way, becoming so mechanical in terms of observation then opened up a whole new level of creativity and intuition, which is fascinating. It's a fascinating experience. Anyway, yeah.
Well, you said something earlier about priorities, and I think what people often say is priorities are shifting. And I can understand how that seems to be the case. But I think what might be more accurate to say is as my awareness shifts, I become more aware of priorities. And when I was still doing a lot of corporate work, people would have, as you know, if we sit down and we go through this process of asking what do people have their attention on, an executive will have hundreds of things they got attention on, all requiring some kind of action. And so even if you only have 100, how the hell do you decide what number 74 is versus number 73? And I've reduced that to just two simple questions. What value shows up if I do this? What risk do I bear if I don't? And if people start thinking about value risk, it makes them come back and start to think about, well, wait, what is important here? So if I do this, what follows from that? But what's really being asked is what's really important deep inside of you. And if I ask that personally, we would say what's in my heart versus what's in my head. Corporately, what's in the corporate heart versus the corporate head. And that can become a really interesting question because as soon as I move into an area that I think is where the real value lies, I'll discover something. So again, as with Ouspensky and all the theosophists, I observe and I go, oh no, wait a minute, it's reading more over here. And I start making these little subtle adjustments. And as I adjust subtly, my vision sees something else. And so it is a, quote, shifting priority, but it's more about shifting awareness. And then I become more able to choose that which matters most.
Well said.
So, I mean, I have, my next actions list. I don't know how long it is right now, but I dare say at least 50% of it ain't never going to get done because at the point I put it down there, it was, well, that seems important. Now it's not so much.
Yeah, for sure. And you've just got the Spanish version of your book just got published, right?
Yep, its official launches today.
Oh, wow. Well, congratulations. And, as you know, a mutual friend of ours at one point, many, many, many years ago, said Latin America and South America was going to be sort of the future of where sort of the energy fields might might go. Your perception of that? You seem to have a resonance with the Spanish world or the Spanish speaking world, right?
Yeah, it was when the English version came out from Self Talk to Soul Talk, which was in February. Uh, I was invited by different groups to do different kinds of webinars and whatnot. And one was with a Spanish speaking group called Manifestando Posibilidades, Manifesting the Possibilities. And I had a lovely translator working with me who knows this kind of work. And we've had, I don't know, 200 or 300 people on that uh, Zoom call. And as we started fielding questions, uh, people started saying, well, can we have this book in Spanish? And I said, well, heck, I mean, my publisher asked me what my goal was with the English book. And I said, oh, you don't understand. It's done. The goal was write it. He said, but don't you have a sales goal? I said, no. You know, uh, so I haven't done a whole lot of active promotion, uh, probably because I just don't naturally resonate with that kind of stuff. But this group says, well, can we have it in Spanish? I said, well, you know, it cost around 10 grand to get the English version done. I suppose it will cost around that too. And someone said, well, why don't we do a fundraiser? And so that led to a GoFundMe campaign. And then a bunch of people put the money in, and ta-da, here it is in Spanish. So now what we're looking at is uh, there's a number of people in Colombia and Venezuela, Argentina, Chile, Mexico that would like to have workshops or seminars built around this work. And so I said, well, if we get the Spanish version done, assuming we can raise the wherewithal to do that, sure, I'll go to all those countries and just do workshops and we won't charge people for them. Why? Well, because there's a spiritual thirst or hunger for this kind of awakening. And I use the term awakening a lot uh, because a lot of people are running around loose today screaming at people, wake up. And our spiritual teacher, I was once pretty uh, animated about a seminar that he and I were co-facilitating. And on a break, he said, Russell, what are you so frustrated about? And I said, John Roger, they're so slow to wake up. And he said, oh, Russell, if you've got a 2-year-old baby and it's sleeping, do you go shake it and say, wake up, grow faster? No, I mean, sleep is part of the process of awakening. So what's awakening? Well, a thing that awakens was previously asleep, a thing that's asleep was previously awake. So what we're really doing is coming back to the primal state of being who we really are. And that's happening all across Latin and South America. People are resonating strongly with moving into and past the religiosity that's been so much part of that culture and into that spiritual awakening. So I think that's what I resonate with is people who are thirsting for awakening. So I don't know if that was much of an answer, but it's the one that came
It
out.
was a good answer. No, it's a great answer. Yeah. No, just curious for me because a lot of my work has not taken me to Latin America. I've done a little bit, so in Venezuela and Colombia and Chile, but haven't. It hasn't been very much on my radar. So I was just curious that it seems like it's on your radar now. So we'll just let that pass. I, for the folks who haven't read the book yet, who might be listening or watching this right now, what would you say are the key elements, the key? You kind of said it well. You don't want to be prescriptive about this or religious about this, but what are the things, if you had some advice in an elevator and, let's give it 16 floors, right? And somebody says, gee, Russell, what should I know about the book or from what you've done? Give me the bottom line.
Eric Hoffer was a San Francisco longshoreman and a philosopher and poet. And I think he said it best. I paraphrase him. You can never get enough of what you don't really want. So most people can resonate with, yeah, I wanted something. I busted my tail to get it, got it, and wondered why I ever wanted it. That goes to that deeper question. So the self-talk says we should go out here and do this, and the soul talk says we should experience this. So what's the difference between what I want in the world and the experience I'm seeking? That's a lot about what the book is about. And inside of that, there's three really primary keys, and they all start with A: awakening, awareness, and acceptance. Awakening and awareness kind of revolve one around the other. So again, awakening, a thing that was asleep, is one that can awaken, and the thing that awakens can go to sleep. So if we awaken, we bring back into consciousness or back into awareness something that was already there. Awareness, as I awaken, I become more aware of my external environment, and I can become more aware of my internal environment. And as I become a more awake and more aware, then I notice what's in front of me to be done. And a lot of what's in front of me to be done in the world is less than fun. And so people resist what's out there. And we say, no, no, no. You don't have to like it, but you really might want to learn to accept it. And people think acceptance means like. And as you and I know, acceptance means just recognize what it is, because then you can do something with it. So, like I say in the book, if you're driving along the road and you get a flat tire, your mind can go, well, this is not right. And they gave me a dirty, rotten, inadequate tire, and they put it on wrong. And when I get all done blaming everything in the world, there's still a flat tire. So until I can accept that a fact, I can't do much about it. And the world is full of examples of people who've been challenged in major serious ways. I know a fellow who had his face burned off in a motorcycle accident and all of his fingers. And when he got healed from that, he then wound up paralyzed. And then he wrote a book that says it's not what happens to you, it's what you do about it. And he's become one of the most sought after public speakers the world over, all on the issue of, well, if you can accept what you got, you can really do a lot with it. And I think that's the primary thing here is you never get enough of what you don't really want. And if you want to really get clear, then awakening, awareness, and acceptance, those are real keys. Doesn't tell anybody what to awaken to or what to accept. Just says, hey, what is being awakened? What are you now aware of? Well, what do you need to accept so you can move on it?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I think, in my work, years in my work, one of the reasons people resist it is because just emptying everything that's in their head means they have to accept that they've made those commitments. And it's, like, hey, that's your life. People get mad at me for their list. I go, excuse me, that ain't my list. That's your list. Right.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So, if people have not sort of been on, let's say, quote, a spiritual path, I hate to even use those words, but I will, but think they want to be or should be, or to your point, already are, just need to become aware of what it is. What are some keys? Meditate, deep breathe, eat good food, what? So got some tips and tricks that you would share with people to say, okay, if you want to find out more of what that intuition is, here's some things you might want to consider doing.
Yeah, actually, in the book, I put a whole bunch of exercises and meditations that are designed to help a person look inwardly. So One of the questions I like to ask people from time to time who are sort of struggling with this is, hey, have you ever had an argument with your own self? Well, yeah. So we can hold conflicting thoughts. Well, that's interesting. So where do those come from? And do you ever find yourself thinking a thought and wish you weren't thinking it? Yeah. Well, who noticed? And so, what I like to say about this whole thing about spiritual or divinity or God or whatever is that uh, I interchange terms like God and spirit and the divine because, in my estimation, whatever that is never named itself. It took a human being to do that. Um, but that just about, uh, I don't know what, 80, 90% of the world has some form of there's an it. Well, what's that it? And so part of the meditation process that we will share in the book is simply, hey, it can be as simple as close your eyes, do a little breathing, and we suggest a common breathing exercise in there that really helps calm the self, and then just notice what's coming up, and is what coming up inside coming from a place of uh, expansion, or is it coming from a place of contraction? And well, what's that difference? And so they're just a bunch of questions that help people look inwardly. And I don't care what they call it. The word religion itself comes from a Latin word ligare, which means to connect, and re means again. So that's like awakening. So what are we connecting to? And for me, it's that deeper self, the one that goes, I knew it, or oh God, I knew it, but I didn't pay attention to it. So I think it's a simple process that isn't necessarily easy because we've been more trained to pay attention to the noisy aspects of the mind and the world and pay less attention to that quieter, soft place. But most people are not saying, wow, that was really relaxing. I hate it. Well, where do I
Yeah.
get the relaxation from? Where's peace? And those kind of questions, are designed to make a person look, because then they'll find their source.
Yay. Practical spirituality, as you know. That's what it's about. It's funny you mentioned, have you ever had arguments with yourself? I talk about the committee in my head, and sometimes they're just throwing plates at each other. If you could just get if you could just get your committee to shut up or get into consensus, you'd probably never have any stress.
And our mutual friend Ariana Huffington calls it her obnoxious roommate in her mind.
Yeah, yeah. So what, Russell? What's next? What's up?
What's next in terms of what?
Oh,
For
in terms
me,
of
for you,
in
for the
terms,
world.
yeah. Just in terms of, come on, you and I are, getting up there in these years. So, at a certain point, I'm going, I kind of think I've done it. I thought I'd done it as soon as I wrote the book, but then God wasn't done with me yet. So I said, okay, well, how efficient can I be with getting this good news out to as many people as I can, as efficiently as I can? And that's still kind of going on. But I can't say it's a huge driver for me. It's just it's been put in motion, so I'm just following through on the motion and doing the best I can with it. And as you know, taking everything based upon what it is and just adding light and love to it. So that's kind of my what's up uh, for you.
Well, these days I'm doing a lot of free mentoring sessions with people. They can sign up for them on my website, and why am I doing that? Well, several answers. One is that I just love being able to ask the kind of questions and provide a sense of inner guidance that help people resolve where they think they're in conflict or they're stuck or whatever. And it's usually pretty simple to help people discover a space that expands within. Well, why that? Well, way back when we started Insight, I never thought that it would be anything that more than a few hundred or a few thousand people would go through. But I remember we ran I think it was the third Insight seminar ever in Los Angeles. And a fellow came through who had been, or who was uh, a vice president with a major insurance company, and he had 5,000 people in his direct line of reports that he was responsible for. And he came to me about 3 months later and said how whatever happened for him allowed him to transform the whole work environment for 5,000 people. And I went, oh, that's what this is about. It's not about what you do or what I do. It's about what people do with what we are able to share with them. And most of us will never see the value and the impact that takes place. So for me, that person that I've talked to later today, God knows what he or she might do for how many others, whether it's themselves, their family, or something larger. And inside of that, one of the things that I love doing right now is helping people who help others expand their ability to help others. So it's the multiplier effect. And
Yeah.
as you know, it's not whether they know your name or my name, it's whether they know their own name.
Yeah. And I tell people, even with my work, which, it has subtleties to it, which can go to these higher realms, but even in most practical realms, anybody starts to implement any of these best practices about keeping your head clear, staying, clarifying what your commitments are, having space in your head to be creative and intuitive and be strategic and all that and be present. All those things, anybody does any of that, it affects every single intersection in their life. Every single person that they then engage with, whether that person gets it or not, they get something osmotically anyway from
Yes.
from how people are engaging with them. They say, "Oh, you're going to do that? Let me write that down." Wow, I care. It matters to me, and I love. Tell me more. Tell me more about that. Yeah, which automatically says I'm listening. I'm paying attention. Which God knows we all need. More of from all of us. With each other. Forever. Anyway, well, thanks, Russell. It's nice, always inspiring to chat with you. Look, if anybody wants to follow up with you, get in touch with you, is that okay? And how could or should they do that?
Sure. So my website is my name, russellbishop.com, and Russell has two S's and two L's. And my email, I print it on the back of the book as well. So that's pretty easy. It's russell@russellbishop.com. So please feel free to drop me a line or schedule a session, whatever you might like.
Yeah. Any other message you'd like to tell the world of our network?
There's a old song says, "What the world needs now is love." And the loving that the world needs is inside of each of us. And I think if we want to heal anything in the world, whether it's the conflict going on in the Ukraine or the conflict in the neighborhood just down the street, it's going to really start with how much more loving can I bring present inside of me so that wherever I am, there's that healing presence. And if I'm not aware of that, I may be bringing strife to an area that doesn't need any more strife. So awaken that inner heart and let the love light shine.
Yay. Amen. Thanks, Russell. Good stuff.
Thank you, David.
As usual.
You're a blessing.
Takes one to know one.